All right, Kenton, you can get your feet down there. We don't need to use it as a footrest. Judges, chapter 14, we learned about the beginnings of the life of Samson, and here we'll begin to learn about his troubles. So, Judges chapter 14, lesson 89. That's where you should be at there. So we'll start reading of Judges chapter 14, verse 1, Samson, and the troubles that he now creates with the Philistines. If you see, before we begin chapter 14, verse 13, last verse there, verse 25, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times. What is that Spirit moving him to do? God sends that Spirit to him so that he is moved to go and create trouble with the Philistines. Okay, that's the whole purpose of the Spirit moving Samson, is that it will cause him to desire to go out and create trouble with the Philistines. So we'll see what types of trouble he makes here in Judges chapter 14, verse 1. And Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman of Timnath, of the daughter of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and mother and said, I have seen a woman of Timnath, in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto them, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord, and that he sought an occasion against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Then Samson went down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath. And behold, a young lion roared against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him, as he would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took thereof in his hands, and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he told not them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down unto the woman. Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. It came to pass, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. We're going to stop there a second. So, Samson sees a beautiful young woman. We're going to learn that that is one of the key faults of Samson that he has. He is always tempted by the beautiful young women of the Philistines. Not the godly women. He doesn't look on their hearts, but he instead looks after their bodies and what makes them beautiful. He falls in love with these heathen women. We see time after time, we will see how he cannot stay away from them, but continues over and over. So he finds this one, though, woman who pleases him well, and he desires to have her as his wife. If he married her, what would that mean? Well, he knew, because remember, the Spirit of the Lord had troubled him to make trouble amongst the Philistines. So he knows, if I marry this woman, I'll be living amongst the Philistines, and I'll have easy access to cause all kinds of trouble. Notice here, the Lord moved Samson to do this. The Lord put it in his heart The Lord had divinely planned that this was to happen. Why do I point that out? Because there are so many who say they are Christians and will try to influence you, especially your minds and your hearts, so that you might say, well, this thing that I'm going to do is not going to please anybody or make anybody happy, but secretly in my heart, my intention is good. I'm going to do this, and it will produce great results that everyone will see in the end. He did it because he loved the Lord. That's why he did these things. One might say, I'm going to marry a heathen woman, and I'm going to teach her all about God, and then she's going to join the church and be a godly woman, and they'll see I can do that. I have the power to do that, because that's what's in my heart. Or one might say, I know, I'm going to go and leave the church. I'm going to go live in some ungodly place where there is no church, but I will start spreading and teaching the people there, and I'll have such a good influence that everyone will want to start a church there, and everyone will then later praise and thank me because they didn't have the sight to do it. They couldn't have done it, but I think I have the ability to do that. It's not true. God inspired, He moved Spirit upon Samson to do this. So we need to be careful, because there are lots of people, especially those who call themselves Christians, who say that. I don't need to follow what everybody else is doing. I don't always have to follow it. But the fact of the matter is, to go that far outside and say, I'm just going to go find a heathen woman and marry her and teach her how to be a godly woman, or I'm just going to move away from the church 500 miles and I'll still be able to live godly in a godly manner. Those things are unfortunately not very true. And you might say, well, I'm doing this because I have a right good heart, because I can do better than everyone else and show them. Be careful of those people. That's what Samson is doing here. But Samson can do it here because God has moved and inspired him to do so through the Spirit. Because when Samson tells his parents that this is what he's going to do, what do they say? Oh, you can imagine them sitting up late at night discussing with each other after Samson has gone away. What are we going to do? What have we done with our son? What is our son thinking? He's going to marry this Philistine ungodly woman, and he's going to go live with him. And here's our son that we love and that we've instructed and that we've taught up and that we've brought to the temple or tabernacle over and over. And now he's forsaking it all. And you can imagine the weeping of his mother and the hand-wringing and the praying of his father for his soul and for his spirit. But what they didn't know is that there was a spirit upon Samson that made him do this, that was making him to desire to do this. What they didn't know is that God was going to use him to trouble the Philistines in this sense. They were maybe thinking of some godly leader like Jephthah, or Ehud, or Gideon, who would gather together a large army, and he would be a fearless and bold leader, because in that case he could marry a good godly heathen or good godly wife, not a heathen one, and he could leave her, that godly wife, in the land of Canaan as he went out to fight the enemies. That's probably what they were thinking when they were told by the Lord that he would be one to fight the Philistines. Not that he would marry a heathen wife and live in that heathen country. But that's the case. So Samson did not listen to his father's words. Twice he tells his father, get her for me. He is being demanding, not showing much or any obedience here at all. As they go, we see, and they travel to meet this woman, Samson comes across a lion, and he rips it into pieces with his bare hands, we're told. He doesn't need anything in his hand. He's got no weapon, in other words. And he doesn't tell his father or his mother what he's done, but he's killed that lion, and he leaves it laying there. He probably goes down to Philistia, sees the woman there that he wants to marry, and he goes back home. Again, doesn't tell his parents about it at all. So, he again goes back to marry the young woman. On the way, he wandered off again to wherever it was that he had killed that lion, and the carcass, the body of that lion, is lying there. But it's been hollowed out. Insects, as they often do, take over a dead body. And in this instance, bees have moved in and made some type of hive so that there was a delicious, sweet, tasting honeycomb inside of that lion. He ate some of the honey, and he took some of the honey with him and gave it to his parents. They didn't know where it came from because he was not supposed to have touched a dead body. And Samson doesn't tell them because probably on his journeys back and forth, his mind is turning of how he can create trouble with the Philistines. And so this situation is going to set up that troublesome situation. He gets married, and they have the wedding feast, and that's where we left off. They have the feast, and these companions, 30 companions, are brought in to be with him. Men of the Philistines. When somebody in your family gets married, there's a wedding party. And the bride and the groom usually invite some of their closest friends or relatives or siblings to be part of that important wedding party. Well, here in the land of Philistia, Samson has no good godly friends. So instead, some companions need to be brought into him to make his party more enjoyable. Otherwise, it's a party all by himself. So let's see what happens there. Verse 12. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If ye can certainly declare it me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets. And 30 changes and 30 change of garment. But if ye cannot declare it me, then ye shall give me 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. And they said unto him, Put forth the riddle, that we may hear it. And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, Entice thy husband, that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take that we have? Is it not so? And Samson's wife wept before him and said, Thou dost but hate me, and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. And he said unto her, Behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother, and shall I tell it to thee? And she wept before him the 7 days while the feast lasted. And it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him. And she told the riddle to the children of her people. And the men of the city said unto him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, If ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, and slew 30 men of them, and took their spoil, and gave change of garments unto them, which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. So what was Samson thinking? Probably while he was walking, after taking some of that honey out of that lion. Simple. I'll hold a riddle contest. And if they can't answer the riddle, I get a reward. If they can't answer the riddle, I'll give them a reward. And so at the wedding feast, he says to his 30 companions, the riddle. He says unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. They could not figure it out. So what do? They go to his wife instead. Hey, you're one of us. He's one of those Israelites. You're a Philistine like us. We don't want to give this man prizes, 30 garments. We don't have the money or the time, or we don't want to give it to him. Just go tempt him for a little bit. Entice him. Weep. Whatever you got to do. Use your womanly ways to be able to get from him this answer. And then, once you get the answer, come and tell us. And we'll be able to get it out of him. So she tries. And she even goes as far as to say, you must not love me. For if you loved me, you would tell me the answer. And he says to her, I haven't even told my father and my mother. Why would I tell you? And she continues to bother him and bug him until finally, he gives in. Now his giving in is probably more of intention than anything else. Because he tells her the answer to the riddle. Tells her what had happened. And she then can go tell her companions or her friends. And now they can come in before the sun goes down on the seventh day. They finally give him the answer. It's a lion and honey. Now his anger is kindled. And you can imagine him pointing his finger and growling at them. You did this because you kept enticing my wife. You kept bothering her. You should have left her near alone. But more than likely, this is exactly what Samson wanted. For the Lord had troubled him to do this thing. And so what does he do? He travels a distance away. He finds 30 Philistines. He kills them with his hands. He takes off of them their clothing. And he brings that clothing back with him. And you can imagine him in disgust, throwing it at the feet of these other men, saying, here's your clothing. You only got this because you kept bothering my wife. You should have left her well enough alone. And then after giving them that change of clothing, he's angry and he leaves his wife here in the land of the Philistines. He heads back to Canaan where his parents are, and he goes back to their house. Meanwhile, this woman, she's given instead in marriage to another one of his so-called friends, the companions that were with him. He had abandoned her in a sense. In the eyes of the Lord, they were married. But he had abandoned her in a sense. He had used her for his purpose. And so he goes back to his father's house, and she's given away. He probably, again, being moved by the Spirit of the Lord to cause trouble, knew that. So that now we see in the beginning of chapter 15 how he uses that to his advantage to be able to go after the Philistines. Verse 1 of chapter 15. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid, meaning a goat, and he said, I will go in to my wife into the chamber. But her father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. So Samson goes back to the home of his wife. She's not there, more than likely. And the father says, well, I gave her away to one of your companions from your party. Here, take my younger daughter. She's much more beautiful than my older daughter who you married. Marry her instead. What's Samson's reaction? Verse 3, and Samson said concerning them, now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took firebrands, and turned tail to tail, and put a firebrand in the midst between the two tails. And when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines, and burnt up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and olives. Then the Philistines said, who hath done this? And they answered, Samson, son-in-law of the Timnite, because he hath taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. And Samson said unto them, though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. And he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Etaim. So what happens here in the end? Samson finally getting over his anger. One morning he gets up, takes a goat from probably his father's herd or somewhere around there, and he heads down to the house of his wife, thinking he shall have a feast with her and her family, maybe try to make amends. And when he arrives, she's not there, and the father says, as we said, here's my daughter. Well, he doesn't want that. So what does he do? Out of anger, He goes and he captures 300 foxes. Again, a miracle. Imagine any of you catching one fox. He captures 300 of them. He takes them by the tail, brings the two tails together, and ties a rope around them. And then he takes a stick and sets it on fire, animals being afraid of that fire, and jams it between the tails of the foxes. You can imagine their tails beginning to burn, and they go crazy. They want to do anything they can to get away from each other and that fire. And because of that, they run haphazardly everywhere. Again, controlled by God, because nothing happens by accident. But haphazardly running through every area all around them, causing all of the fields of the Philistines with their corn and olives and everything else to burn down. They're destroyed. So the Philistines don't have food to maybe eat, and they don't have food for their animals. So Samson causes that to happen. What then is the result of that? The men of Philistia are very upset, and they want to know whose fault it is, who's caused this, and they find out that Samson did this out of anger because Samson's wife had been taken away from him. So they go and they find Samson's wife and her father, and they burn them. Well, what does Samson do as a result of that? Samson then goes and finds those men who burned his wife and his father-in-law, and he takes them and he kills all of them. He slaughtered them, slew them, smote them hip and thigh, and then he left and went somewhere else. So this instance of marriage is one in which God had used Samson through sinful activity to carry out the work of the Lord, to cause a strife amongst the Philistines, because Samson will be used to deliver them in that way and in that sense. So we'll see what continues to happen with Samson. There's still more stories of how Samson caused trouble and would kill the Philistines to set God's people free from their oppression. We'll see that in the next lesson. There's one question there. You guys can answer that. Maybe what's a sin of any other saints in the Bible? Something that they did that was wrong, but it served God's purpose. And we're thinking of saints like maybe the heroes of faith might be a good example. Maybe Jacob lying to his father about being Esau so that he got the birthright.